Governance Now. This is Gitanjali Minhas and you're watching Checks and Balances. Just as the world was slowly coming out of pandemic, geopolitical tensions, Russia-Ukraine war, and sanctions against nations have disturbed the financial sector, trade, and technology. Globally, central banks have been hiking interest rates to curb demand. In its latest forecast, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the Paris-based international body, has projected the global GDP growth by 3.1% in 2022 to only 2.2% in 2022-2023. As exports and domestic demand growth moderates, India's GDP will slow down to 5.7% in 2023-2024. But India would still be growing more than any other G20 nations, including Saudi Arabia and China. With a huge market, India's growth story is about digitization, e-commerce, and services. To understand India's situation and interventions required for growth of economy, here is what the top economist told us. Professor Arun Kumar, who taught economics at JNU for 3 decades, has said,
already we are in a recessionary phase.
Okay.
And it will deepen further because the reason being that the world is experiencing a new Cold War between the advanced countries and the countries in China, Russia, Iran, etc. on the other hand. So there will be 2 blocks, and these 2 blocks are actually capitalist blocks. Earlier the Cold War was between a communist bloc or a socialist bloc, you can say, and the capitalist bloc. The energy crisis is again causing high inflation, and that is going to lead to decline in demand. Problems of the US with China were there from before the Ukraine war. This situation is going to aggravate, and therefore no predictions can be made at this point of time. We cannot predict for the next 6 months. How can we predict for the next 5 years? This is a war for resources. So I think it's going to be long lasting. Trade, finance, and technology will be all disturbed.
Lord Meghnad Desai, British economist, Padma Bhushan awardee, and former Labour politician, too opine.
We will have serious stagflation across the world, and no country is going to escape. If the Russia-Ukraine war doesn't settle soon, it will lead to a much bigger war with Taiwan and all that coming in, and the world dividing in 2 blocks. I know India has got Russian oil for the time being, and while the war lasts, but that is the war is not going to last for 10 years. So and India is not going to get oil for 10 years. So I think everybody should be prepared for a severe stagflation. China is seriously slowing down, and China has inflation, but they're trying to kind of mask it by not issuing estimates and things like that. Now, if China slows down and US slows down, there will be a massive recession globally. There's no room for complacency whatsoever.
Whether India is really decoupled from global economy is a matter of debate. Responding to a question on RBI, financial agencies, and analysis projecting a 6 to 7% growth rate for India, Professor Arun Kumar here said,
that many international agencies like IMF, World Bank, etc., they are financial agencies. And these financial agencies don't want to admit that things are bad. Because the moment they say that things are bad, immediately the financial markets will begin to decline. RBI is completely wrong. The financial experts are also completely wrong. India is also into recession now. You see, our data, the quarterly data, does not take into account the decline in the unorganized sector. And already before the pandemic, our rate of growth had dropped quarter after quarter from 8% to 3.1%, And even now, without the unorganized sector being taken into account, our GDP level is roughly what it was in 2019. The investment to GDP ratio in 2012-13 was at 36%. That dropped to 30% and is roughly there. So the 7% growth rate that RBI keeps talking about, Ministry keeps talking about, is only the growth rate of the organized sector. That's not the growth of the Indian economy.
Here, Lord Desai said,
From 1990 to about 2016, India had a very good growing economy. Despite the 2008 shock. In 2016, for various reasons, maybe demonetization, maybe a GST, economy slowed down. And economy hasn't really regained its dynamic that it had in the 25 years between 1991 and 2014. Now, what's important is for India to regain the dynamic. Unfortunately, this big recession has come in the middle. And so India will find it difficult to manage. But, I think there are clever people in India. There are clever people among economists, among bankers and so on. And they will find a way out. But I think there is also a lot of complacency.
on high foreign investments in India during COVID period and the developments thereafter. Professor Arun Kumar here said,
foreign exchange reserves you managed to build up during the COVID period because you were getting capital flows from the advanced countries. There's so much liquidity that the liquidity was looking for places to invest. And the Indian stock market was rising, so they came to the stock market that brought in capital. And so you built up your reserves during that period. But that was not on the basis of the strength of the Indian economy. That was because your rate of return in the organized sector has gone up because the unorganized sector is doing poorly. So therefore, this reserves situation, it helps in the balance of payment. But it does not mean that your economy is doing well.
okay.
Balance of payment you see is now deteriorating as we see that exports have declined. Imports are high because the commodity prices are high globally. Your imports have risen dramatically, and you are going to have a current account deficit of about $45 to $50 billion. So that's why your reserves are declining, your currency is declining, and to prevent the currency from collapsing, the RBI is intervening in the market.
Further, underlining the importance of unorganized sector to increase GDP, Professor Arun Kumar here explained.
We have 4 different kinds of unemployment. We have unemployment, underemployment, disguised unemployment, and those who've stopped looking for work. And their number is 27.8 crore. So we need to provide work to 27.8 crore people. And if we manage to provide them some basic job, not a very high-skilled job, then our GDP will go up by 15%. There will employment generation be in the micro sector and the small sector and agriculture. The problem in the micro sector is that we lump it together with the small and medium. We call it MSME. So all the policy benefits of MSME go to the medium sector, not the small and the micro. So we have to separate the MSME into micro separate and small and medium separate, and then devise policies separately for micro. And what are the policies required? They need to be cooperativized. If they are created into cooperatives, and the government will have to provide support. Now, large sector is only 6,000 units. Small and medium are 6 lakh units, and micro are 6 crore units. Agriculture is 45%, but of the MSME, the micro sector has 97.5% of the employment. At the moment, we are not spending enough on the rural employment guarantee scheme. We are not spending enough on education, on health, and these are employment generating sectors. If you do that, then you can tackle your employment problem. Especially given that in India, 94% of the workers are in the unorganized sector. So by definition, the unorganized sector is not able to bargain for higher wages when the prices rise. So even a 5% inflation in India is very high. Even 4% rate of inflation is high. When there's massive unemployment, the education levels are so poor, most of the industry says that our graduates are undertrained. They're not capable of doing a modern day job. Our education levels are abysmal. We hardly produce 50,000 world-class people, graduates, and the rest are very low skilled. So, they will not be able to produce a demographic dividend. There is huge frustration in the youth, and they are therefore being led astray. Now, violence has entered family. They don't see any hope of the future.
Lord Desai here said,
in a poor country, the government has to cheat somewhat to be able to give some succor to the poor. But I think the choice for India would be basically who is looked after. Do we look after the organized sector, the profitable sector, so the competitive sector, or do we look after the rest of the country? For example, Manrega is still one of the most relevant welfare measures in India. Now, I did talk during the pandemic about an urban Manrega. They should be able to stay in Delhi or Mumbai or wherever they are and get, let's say, 100 days allowance, which would look up, which would at least not cause them to leave Delhi and go back. Now, these sorts of measures are going to come up because Indian democracy is very strong. And then if people are badly off, people will demand things. I have to say for Narendra Modi, since 2014, he has always looked after bank accounts for the poor, some Kisan, on health and so on. So the will is there.
Lord Desai also spoke about having fiscal discipline and said,
India is an inflation-prone country because by and large there is no fiscal discipline at the state level. And although at the government level they say they're disciplined, the numbers of Indian finances are so mysterious that you can never figure out whether the government is spending money secretly or not. I think there are very good policymakers in India. I have a lot of respect for Nirmala Sitharaman. The question is, when it gets difficult in budgetary terms, can a government say, we give the poor higher priority than has been done case even by us so far? About 200 to 300 million people are in that situation. And can they somehow be looked after if things get hard? That is the challenge before the government of India. That can only be done by Narendra Modi. India having become the fifth most richest countries and so on, I always point out it's 150th in terms of per capita income because we have a huge population, everything looks big. But India has to really consistently get into a reform program, a growth program, which lasts 5 to 10 years. We need a 5 or 10 year period. India needs to be cautious, and rather than boastful. Sitting in London, I see the situation much more globally than specifically from the point of view of India.
Lord Desai also called for having pro-poor policies as against having Swadeshi policies. Here is what he said.
In India, there is still what I call a fake battle between Swadeshi and this. Policies don't need to be Swadeshi, don't need to be Pardeshi. They need to be pro-poor. They need to look after the most vulnerable people without necessarily neglecting growth. Growth and innovation are there, but we also have to look after the poor, especially in the coming 10 years. When I predict things are going to be bad, because poor in India are very poor.
Outlining measures being adopted by the government to strengthen Indian economy, BJP National Spokesperson on Economic Affairs, Gopal Agarwal, here said,
Energy is one area where a lot of initiative has to be taken. The government is taking so that we reduce our import bill for crude oil. That is the major component. We have signed free trade agreement with UAE, Australia. Our free trade agreement with UK is all on the final stages. US is also on final stages. Particularly with farmers producer organization, FPOs, we are focusing on value addition at the farm level. And Amit Shah ji, who is the Minister of Cooperation, is focusing extremely on the cooperative sector, which can drive India's growth and which will percolate the economic growth to the lower strata.
On Swadeshi principles of BJP policies, Agarwal said,
For BJP, Swadeshi doesn't mean that we are going to be a closed economy. We will disintegrate from the global value supply chain and regional supply chain. Our focus is strengthen the value chain domestically, make our industries competitive through cheap power supply, good transportation system, through logistic support, then a lower interest rate, and make them competitive so that they can become competition at the global level. And then Swadeshi means not only manufacture for India, but manufacture for global markets. And we are very clear that Swadeshi doesn't mean that we will go for a closed economy and disintegrate the whole manufacturing sector from the global supply chain. The government has announced an investment of 90,000 crores to develop chip manufacturing technology in India. We are investing large money in the green hydrogen energy to meet the energy challenges, etc. 5G is an area where India is taking the leadership, carbon emission. All these areas, India is taking now a leadership at the global levels. So this is Atmanirbhar Bharat. This is the Amrit Kal for India. Our focus of our government under Prime Minister Modi ji is to develop a manufacturing sector, and therefore we have opened our defense sector to domestic producers only. 65% of our defense requirement has been reserved for domestic producers, and we are building defense corridors where MSME sector will get an assured market from the government procurement of defense requirement. And second, tenders less than 200 crores have been reserved specifically for the domestic manufacturers. And then the third is PLI scheme, which is supporting manufacturing sector. Our Prime Minister has come out with a new logistic policy, and then our manufacturing will become globally competitive, and we will be able to integrate our small MSME sector to the global and regional value supply chain. Our target is to increase the contribution of manufacturing sector to the GDP from current 15-16% to 25%, and that will solve the employment problem of the country.
Acknowledging challenges being faced by the government on economic reforms, Agarwal said,
whether it is for the developed nation, emerging economies, or any developing nation, challenges are always there. The question for economic growth and progress depends upon how those challenges are met by the government and how prepared we are to meet those challenges. And existence of a challenges doesn't mean that the economy is will not do good. I agree that unorganized sector, which gives a lot of employment to large population in our country, that's a challenge. Therefore, our government had started in 2014-15 about universality of Provident Fund and PF scheme, where construction labor can have a Provident Fund number which is portable to any area. So ultimately our objective through GST and other initiative reforms, etc., is that the unorganized sector is converted to the organized sector. Employment can be generated only through MSME, small manufacturing, and the cooperative ODOP, this small manufacturing, cottage industries, value addition at the agriculture sector through farmers producer organization. This is the right way to generate employment. Second thing I say, in democratic setup at times the economic reforms become quite difficult because of vested interest and stakeholders agitation. Government has already passed the labor codes and they have to be notified. I think government will do it fast, but there has to be a common narration. If well-meaning people come out with proper narration in the support of economic reforms, we can have a faster reform in the unorganized sector also. If you see in the last 1 week, India has seen the fastest FDI flows in inflows in almost 20 after I think 15 or 20 years. So India is getting a lot of investment, and the challenges of Europe and America gives us an opportunity. Even China, which is facing post-COVID policy and a lot of blockage and that is also giving us an opportunity for manufacturing sector to shift from China to our country. So globally, sentiment for India is very positive. I have been to many countries. Many industries, manufacturers and investors are lining up to invest into India. They want to invest into India because of democracy, because of transparent system, stable government, big market, stable fiscal policies, etc. So the thing is, but one thing I would like to say is our states are not following the fiscal discipline. That is, I think, is the biggest challenge in our economy. Other challenges, central government is putting up a lot of effort, and I think the matter is with the court also, election commission also, and public opinion is also turning against these kind of rebels. Though I do not deny the challenges, but I don't think India is into any sort of big difficulty as far as recession and inflation is concerned.
High consumption, massive digitization are driving India's growth story. How India fares in global recession, only time will tell. The government is well-intentioned. Its vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat to increase employment and GDP is truly commendable. For a vibrant economy, it must plug loopholes and address the challenge of employability of its huge unorganized workforce. Thank you for watching Checks and Balances.